The University of Missouri's College of Agriculture, Food and Natural Resources, or CAFNR, is a national leader in agricultural development. Through numerous programs of distinction, their research improves the health of people, animals, environments, and more, shaping the next generation of ag and natural resource leaders and making discoveries that impact not just our country, but the entire world. I'm Rachael Norden, and in this series of Thinking Out Loud, I sat down with the directors of these programs to shine a light on these unsung heroes of agriculture and bring their research to you. This episode, I chat with Dr. Jamie Corder, director of the National Center for Applied Reproduction, or NCARG, and advisor to the Show Me Select Replacement Heifer program.
So anyone who is familiar with the University of Missouri Division of Animal Sciences has probably heard of the name Dave Patterson. He was the thought leader behind the Show Me Select Replacement Heifer program, and is part of a large part of the reason for its success in combination with producers in the state of Missouri. But once that program was kind of up and going, he had this other idea for this National Center for Applied Reproduction and Genomics, or NCARG. And his thought was really the University of Missouri itself is a leader in all things reproductive technologies and also in all things genomics. And so it was a logical step for him to say, we have the innovation, we have the leaders in these areas of animal science. We should be the national hub and the national center and take this extension program outside of the state of Missouri and make a national impact. And so that's really the brainchild that was NCARG. Now, it's a wonderful thought, but the hard concept is, how do you bring that thought into fruition, into a physical entity? And so I would say probably about 6 years ago, Dave Patterson, along with Jared Decker and others that were currently employed by the University of Missouri, wrote a USDA grant, a CARE grant, which is a combination of research and extension, and they said there's a need for this. When we look at extension in the areas of reproduction and genomics across the United States, there's a shrinking subset of people whose sole job is to go around and educate people on beef cattle reproduction and genetics and why that's important to their operations profitability, both from a producer standpoint, but also from a veterinary continuing education standpoint. And so that grant was funded 6 years ago, but what happened, very shortly after that was COVID, and everyone's lives changed. And so it was kind of a slow up and going thing, but in the background prior to me being employed by the university, there were people working on trying to bring this idea through. And so there were a lot of online webinars that were created, right? That was what we did during COVID, was a lot of online education. And so it was really geared towards veterinary continuing education, because those people out there had to still get those continuing education credit hours. And so there was some really great content that was created free of charge for veterinarians who were looking to get continuing education credits around beef and dairy reproductive technologies, the estrus synchronization protocols and things like that, and then as well as genomics and the adoption of genetic technology. And so from that, we all got through COVID, and then NCARG received a $2 million workforce development grant from the state of Missouri. And with that $2 million was to build a physical facility for NCARG. And so that currently is in construction towards the tail end of it. We're hoping to have a ribbon cutting ceremony in the fall for it. But the physical location of NCARG is actually at South Farm. So the Central Missouri REAC, the beef research and teaching farm, is located right there in the Creed Barn. And so it's got a 12-stanchion cattle handling facility, so we can train on artificial insemination, synchronization protocols, teaching multiple students at one time. And then it also has a state-of-the-art, single animal working facility where we can do embryo transfer, those types of things as well. There's a cool observation deck. But anyway, that's kind of the whole, it's coming to fruition. So if you haven't heard a lot about NCARG, it's because we've slowly been trying to build it up to what Dave wanted it to be and what we see it being relevant today in 2025. So.
Yeah. Well, then I'm glad we're having this conversation and able to get this out there. Because, yeah, this is the first I've heard of the program, which surprised me because it does seem like such relevant work that you guys are doing. So there's definitely a few follow-up questions from that I would like to ask. But the first one being just for people like me who don't work in this industry, who don't touch this industry day to day, could you just vocalize and define for me what those two tools are that you use, what reproductive technologies are in your sector, and what are genomics?
Yeah. So I'll answer the easier one first because it's what I do. Genomics, what I tell people is it's like 23andMe, but for cows. So like we can take a DNA sample on a cow, send it into a lab, and we can estimate how well that animal's marbling is going to be, how big their ribeye is going to be. Those are the traits that, people who consume beef are used to. But we also can predict how big that animal's calves are going to weigh at birth. Or at weaning, which is an economic time point for commercial cow-calf producers. So that's my simple kind of explanation of genomic technologies is this ability to, we call it peel back the hide of beef cattle and really understand the genetics of those animals, what they're going to be better or worse at, and then how we can make breeding decisions selecting bulls with that same information to mate to the cows to create progeny that will essentially be better, be worth more money. Now, reproductive technologies would be how you make the babies, right? So we do that in humans too, IVF, different types of things in humans, but in cattle, essentially, we can adjust the hormones within the cows. We call it synchronizing them. And so you have a cow herd of 50 or 100, and there's a certain protocol. There's different ones. Some of them were developed at the University of Missouri that you can follow. You can give them this drug at a certain time and this one, 7 or 10 days after and things like that, to where you can basically get all of these cattle to come into heat, to be receptive to getting pregnant all at the same time. And so when you do that, right, it's not perfect, but when you adopt this type of technology, it has a lot of economic benefits on the tail end. The first being you can use what we call artificial insemination. And so you can just get a straw of semen from an elite bull, so one at the top of the breed that you're using for the traits that you're looking for, and you can use him across all 100 cows if you want to. Whereas if you were just using a bull out in the pasture, they can typically only breed 25 to 30 in a given season. So there's economic benefits to that, both from a logistic standpoint, but also economics. But then more importantly for producers, what it does is cattle all have the same gestation length, right? Humans, it's actually funny, cattle and humans have about a 9-month gestation length. But essentially they're all born really close together, right? So when you're talking about waking up every 4 hours, I calve in February, and this February in Missouri, for whatever reason, it was 20 below. But when you're talking about being with these animals, helping them to get through that calving season, you're shortening that window that you have to basically have sleepless nights. And then at the tail end of that, you have what we call a more uniform calf crop because they were all born around the same time. They probably all weigh more, right? All of these things for cattlemen just lead to increased profitability.
Gotcha. Yeah, that translates. I understand that. It sounds like the work that you do is basically how can we maximize the best thing that we can get out of these cattle through this scientific approach, which makes a lot of sense. So I read that many producers and practitioners haven't had access to the training or economic data needed to use these tools effectively, as we touched on a little bit previously, and that NCARG works to bridge that gap. So this one's a bit of a two-parter. I was wondering if you could say, why does that gap exist, and how does the work that you're doing bridge it?
Yeah. That's a loaded question.
Yes.
But I think, my answer to that is twofold, right? The hurdle to the adoption of technology is just especially genomics, but reproductive technology too. It just seems to be this black box. of like, we don't understand why it works or how it works. And so you need those boots on the ground, those people to have these conversations to translate it into terminology that makes sense to them instead of big words like genomics, single nucleotide polymorphism, or, gonadotrophin releasing hormone, things like
Yeah.
this. Like, they're big words, right? But if someone can just say 23andMe, but for cows, that just makes it so much more approachable.
A lot more digestible.
Yeah, absolutely. And less intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the gap is generational. So the average age of a producer, last I checked, was around 60 years old, right? Those people went to college if they were fortunate enough to, but maybe didn't go through an animal science degree, at the University of Missouri or elsewhere. And on top of that, not only have they been not had formal classroom education on the technology, but it didn't exist back then, right? And so one of the wonderful things that we see happening is, as this transition of ownership from grandfather to grandson or grandfather to son, those kids have had exposure to this type of technology throughout their college careers. And so that gap is just almost bridging itself, but also because there are instructors who are putting that information in front of them, making it less scary, making it more digestible. And so it's an interesting time. I mean, technology's hard, right? We all know that one person who refuses to get rid of their flip phone. I mean, those people do exist. But the good news is that with time, we hope to overcome it. And I mentioned previously to the second part of your question, there's a decreasing number of people who do what we do. State extension specialists across the United States. I know for a fact there are only 7 in the United States that are state extension specialists for genetics. And I think there's maybe 13 or 14 for reproductive technologies. And so you're talking about there are 21 people in the United States who are out talking about, who have doctorates in the degrees, who are out talking about it. And that's a lot of ground to cover, right, for 21 people. And so NCARG hopes to just serve as this national place that you can just go to and get consistent information. The benefit of only being 21 people is that our world is small and we all know each other, right? So, getting that information out, being consistent in the messaging, but just being a go-to place to educate on these technologies is what we hope will help to increase understanding as well as adoption of the technology.
Yeah. It does seem like you guys are filling that hole during a time there's already so much worldwide transition going on here. It please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what the work that you're doing really comes down to ushering in a new era of awareness and education for what you do.
Yes.
That the quote old way of doing things is just not. Maybe not that it's not working, but there's just better ways to do it, more efficient ways to do it.
Yeah, I like that you said that. I mean, there's reasons that the average age of the U.S. producer is 60, right? Because what they're doing has worked. It's not that it doesn't work. It's just that we would like it to work better.
So it sounds like a lot of what's going on at NCARG right now is getting the building blocks to launch the proper program itself in the coming year. So then I guess I would say, instead of asking what kind of research you got going on right now, I'll ask for the fundraising. How can people support what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, you can contact me directly if it's something that you're interested in. There's needs big and small. My contact information's on the university website. I think that's probably the best place to start, because I can direct you where you need to go based on the conversation. But I mean, I think right now it's an exciting time. It's an exciting idea. I just hate to tell you, like, just wait, just give me a little bit of time.
Yeah, no, I get that though. But all good things come to those who wait. And this is obviously a legacy program that's in its infancy stages and is hopefully going to be a nationwide program that, leaves a footprint for many years to come. So I can see why it's important that you get this part right. You know what I mean? So thank you for delving into all that. We do have a little bit more time that we could discuss a little bit of Show Me if you would like to get into that. So I saw here so you said you're an advisor for this program. So what is the difference between being the program director and serving as an advisor?
I guess the answer to your question is, why am I an advisor and not the program director? My answer would be, Show Me Select is really geared around those reproductive technologies. So things like pelvic measurements, reproductive tract scoring of heifers, things that were developed by Dave Patterson, and really kind of he did a lot of work in showing the value and collecting those phenotypes when you're selecting which heifers had basically hit puberty and were ready to breed. And it's really geared around that information. And so Tiago Martins is the new state extension specialist for reproduction. And so it was a very natural fit for him to serve as the program director of Show Me Select. Now, Show Me Select does also have a genomic aspect to it, genetics, and if you're a cattle producer, EPDs, right? You know that there's EPD requirements, which are just those predictions I was telling you about on the cattle. There's requirements for what kind of genetics of bulls you can use in the program. And so since it has that genetic aspect to it, I serve as the program advisor for setting those requirements.
I see. Okay. So for someone like me who doesn't work, again, in this industry, again, just repeating some of these same questions, since we've got these two different programs, could you explain to me, I guess you touched on it in just a moment, but it sounds like this program really hones in, like you said, on the genomics aspect of it. So what exactly does it do that's different from what NCARG does?
Yeah. So NCARG is around kind of beef cattle production in general, right? As a whole, you have a herd of 150, 100, 200 cattle. It's about basically the operation itself functioning and adopting this technology as a whole. Show Me Select is geared around what we call the replacement heifer. And so if you have a cow herd, right, of 100, not all of those are going to make it from one year to the next. They either don't get pregnant, or they get sick, or they get old and thin and sold. There's reasons that you have to replace that cow herd, right? And you do it at an average rate of about 10 to 15% a year. We just expect 15% of those older cows, older mama cows, and maybe some of the younger ones to just age out, right? And then they have to be replaced if you're going to maintain kind of the same number, because otherwise you would just run out of cows, right? And so those replacement heifers are, in my opinion, the most expensive part of a commercial cow-calf operator's decision making, because cattle, even though they only have a 9-month gestation, they don't hit puberty until they're 15 months old. So you take a heifer, she's born, 7 or 8 months later, she's weaned off mom, and you make the decision, do I keep her around as a replacement, or do I take her and sell her based on pounds and she goes to a feed yard or to a backgrounder? You make that decision. But from 8 or 9 months, you breed her at 15 months and she calves at 2 years of age. That's a long time to get that return on investment. And that's a long time of growing and developing and all of these things that go into that. And so Show Me Select, to get back to your original question, Show Me Select, the purpose is to help. It's the University of Missouri's kind of stamp on this is all of the boxes a heifer needs to check. This is how she should be developed for that year to 15 months of time. It is our kind of stamp on this is how we think that heifers should be developed in order to stay in the herd and be as profitable as possible. Now, if producers can enroll in this program, and if they do all of these things, there are regional sales across the state of Missouri that are specific Show Me Select sales. So producers go across the state of Missouri and in other states. It has a national impact. Go to these regional sales and they buy these heifers because they know the product that they're getting, right? They're bred at that time, right? They've been developed appropriately. They've checked all of the boxes, and they get substantial premiums on those, extra money on those females, because they come with that Show Me Select tag. So it's a very specific program around the sale of bred replacement heifers.
That makes sense. So it sounds like it really hones in on product quality assurance.
Yes.
Just to
Yeah, that's a
say-
great way to put it. Yeah.
Just that this is if you're a part of the Show Me Select, if you're just part of Show Me Select, then you can know that this other producer who's also a part of Show Me Select is going to meet the exact same standards that you expect to meet, which I can see is a way to be able to, I guess, just know that you're going to get the good quality that you also sold or bred previously. That makes a lot of sense. And you also touched a little bit on sort of the educational side of it. It also seems like it's not just quality assurance, but also a resource that people can go and know that there's this checklist to meet, where if someone's just getting into the industry, they might not otherwise know what that quality assurance is going to be and have a harder time selling. So
absolutely. And all of those guidelines, Show Me Select has a website on the MU webpage, and there are PDFs of exactly what those guidelines are. And it's not just a University of Extension or University of Missouri Extension shows up once and leaves. Like, it is, they show up at pre-breeding, they show up, which is like setting the animal up to be bred. They show up at breeding time, and then they show up to confirm the pregnancy. Like, it is a multiple step process that these producers have to go through, and it's a lot of extra time and labor. But time and time again, with the advantages that they see of participating in this program, we have producers who've been participating for 10, 12 years.
Well, I think that's probably all the questions I've got here. So as far as official questions goes, I'm all wrapped up, but I wondered if you had any final thoughts you'd like to share.
No, I mean, I think, like, for me, I'll back up. I don't really know the particular audience that we're talking to right now, but, like, I think for me, you talked about, like, these technologies and their hurdles to adoption, and kind of how I see it going. But, like, I'd like to just tack on that reproductive technologies, synchronization programs, genomic testing, like, a lot of times producers hear us talk about that and they hear that this is the only way to do it and this is the way it should be done. And I'd like to just emphasize the importance of these are tools. And I've always promoted them that way. You can't build a fence using only a hammer, right? You need a hammer, but you may also need a saw or a post pounder or whatever materials you're using, but you need multiple tools to put that fence together. And so the importance of NCARG, or the function of NCARG, is to help educate people on the fact that these tools exist, but then also that there are multiple ways in which they could be used to help a producer. One of the things that I love about the cattle industry is it's not vertically integrated. So as many operations as there are in the state of Missouri and across the United States, there's that many ways to make money. There's that many decisions that need made that could be different from one operation to the one right next door. And so it really adds so much beauty and so much value to these things, these technologies, because you can use them however you like. But let's have a conversation about the fact that they exist and how you can use them and include them in that tool belt and have them there when you need them.
That was Dr. Jamie Corder with the National Center for Applied Reproduction and Show Me Select Replacement Heifer Program. If you'd like to learn more about the center or replacement program or support their work, visit kafner.missouri.edu. I'm Rachael Norden, and you've been listening to Thinking Out Loud from KBIA 91.3 FM.